Try again. There we go. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Madam Secretary, please take a roll call.
Yes, Madam President, all 5 board members are here tonight, and we have a quorum.
Excellent. For tonight, we will have Miss Angelica Becker, Carmel High School German teacher, lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Tonight, maybe I'll take this one. Tonight we have a number of special presentations, and to get us started, we'll start with Dr. Swenson.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, distinguished citizens, colleagues, students, and honored guests. It's a great pleasure to stand before you. We have a number of national honors to present this evening, and I will turn to Mr. John Williams, principal at Carmel High School, for the first 2 of those awards, and I will assist Mr. Williams as he delivers his remarks.
Good evening, and thanks to the board for having me here to present a couple of things wrapping up last year. I will report that Carmel High School is off to a great start this year and looking forward to an outstanding year, but we do have a couple of things from last year that we need to present to you. First of all, I like to read the names and introduce the names of 2 students and introduce a third that scored a perfect 36 perfect score on the ACT. This achievement on the ACT is significant and rare. On average, fewer than 1/10 of 1%, and you have to listen to this, of all test takers earn the top score, which is a perfect 36. Among ACT tested U.S. high school graduates in the class of 2011, only 704 out of more than 1.6 million students earned this composite score of 36. That's an amazing accomplishment, and 2 of them are not here tonight, Jessica Penna and Tony Tan. And I'd like to introduce Jonas Wang. Oh, is Tony here? Okay, Tony, come on, both of you. Tony and Jonas Wang to come up to the podium.
Our tradition, of course, is that the board salutes and congratulates these outstanding students. Gentlemen, right along the board platform, please. They'd like to shake your hands.
While they're doing that, I'd just like to say, and they could probably help you with the math if you're struggling with this, but you know, there are over 25,000 high schools in this country, and 704 students achieve this out of those 25,000 high schools, and 2 of them are here with us tonight. 3 of them go to Carmel High School, so it puts a little bit more perspective. Okay, enough on these students. Now I want to talk to you about one of our staff members. I'd like to have Angelica Becker, who teaches German at Carmel High School and also is the chair of the World Language Department, to come up. Angelica last year was named the Indiana German Teacher of the Year, and this is an annual award given to one high school teacher based on their teaching credential, student achievement, and professional involvement. The recipient is nominated by her colleagues or an administrator and selected by the executive committee of the Indiana chapter of the American Association of Teachers of German. And Angelica will be honored at the Fall Conference of Indiana German Teachers, or Foreign Teachers, and also is a candidate for the National German Teacher of the Year. Angelica has been the department chair at Carmel for 4 years, and does a great job, not just in the classroom, but also as a great leader in our school. Angelica, thank you.
I will next turn to Mr. Jimmy Inskeep, our athletic director at Carmel High School, and while the baton was passed to Mr. Inskeep here by Mr. Williams, I know he is going to stand metaphorically beside Mr. Inskeep as he announces. He is going to stand literally beside Mr. Inskeep as this next national award is presented. Mr. Inskeep and the aforementioned Mr. Williams.
Just needed a break. Go ahead, Jimmy. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Swinson, and members of our board and everyone here this evening. Tonight it's my honor and privilege to make you aware of a national award and state recognition that was bestowed upon Carmel High School and Carmel Clay Schools this summer by CBS Max Preps, which is known as the top high school website for all sports throughout the country as a media outlet. CBS Max Preps has a way of tracking success on the field and on the court at different sporting events throughout the country, and through their formulas accumulate the top 20 high schools in the country based on a different set of criteria for all sports. Through that, Carmel High School was ranked as the #1 high school athletic program in the state of Indiana, #3 overall in the country, and the nation's top large school high school athletic program, which means that's for all high schools size 2,000 students and higher. Something we're very, very honored and privileged to be a part of, and pleased to bring that recognition back to Carmel Clay Schools.
Thank you. You got it. Absolutely.
As I walk up, I'm tickled because all of my elementary teachers are here from the old College Wood this evening, including my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Reeves.
Another great example of a Carmel student making good. It's next my great pleasure to turn to Mrs. Kelly Davis, principal at Woodbrook Elementary School, to help present the Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching.
Thank you, Dr. Swenson, and thank you, Board, for having me here tonight. And at this time, I'd like to invite one of our Woodbrook teachers, Mr. Jay Volley, to the podium with me as I explain this phenomenal honor that is in front of him. Mr. Volley has been selected by state-level selection committee for the Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching, which will go to teachers who teach kindergarten through 6th grade mathematics. So Mr. Volley, first of all, has been established as one of 3 state finalists in Indiana. His credentials and application packet are now sitting in front of a national level committee, and should he be chosen by this committee that reports directly to the National Science Foundation, the notification will come directly from the White House. So not only are we proud of him being named one of 3 state finalists, but the potential to be honored in Washington, D.C. And I know that the selection committee sees in Mr. Volley what I see every day. He brings his passion for the teaching and learning process to his students. He looks at the beginning of the year at a class of 25, where most of us would say, how am I going to meet the needs of all of these differing students? He says, I want a classroom of 25 differing students. Bring it on. Let me differentiate and meet their needs. That describes you. So thank you very much, and Jay, congratulations. We wish you best of luck.
And I will give Mrs. Davis no rest because I'll have her come back along with Mr. Bob Yule and Ms. Lori Storer, who I believe is also here, to help present a very special national award, the Energy Star School Building Award. Ladies and gentlemen.
We have some other representatives from Cherry Tree too, so if Brad Lance and Mr. Peter English could come up. I'd just like to say something about our energy program at Carmel Clay Schools. We've started our 19th year, and in that 19 years we've saved over $13 million in cost avoidance. Last year alone we saved over $1.6 million in the cost avoidance. Cherry Tree and Woodbrook are our 8th and 9th building to receive an Energy Star Award with a combined savings last year of over $70,000. To receive this award, a building must be in the top 25% of like buildings nationally. A certified engineer also has to verify the comfort and safety regulations in the building. Finally, we also have 5 additional buildings that are very close to the 75 score needed to get the Energy Star Award, so I hope to be back sometime soon. For Cherry Tree, the principal at the time that they got the award was Mrs. Lori Storer. Mrs. Mary Jo Kinnaman is the present principal, and she's not here today, but Mr. Peter English was the assistant principal, and Brad Lance is the custodian.
First grade teacher.
First grade teacher. Okay. I'm sorry. And so we congratulate you on that Energy Star Award. And for Woodbrook, Mrs. Kelly Davis is here to accept the award. And I'd just like to mention the head custodians. Donna McKinney is head custodian at Cherry Tree, and our head custodian at Woodbrook is Rose. And so thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you.
You go first. Come on.
As this distinguished group goes before our board, I would be remiss if I did not note Mr. Bob Yule's more than 15 years of service as our school district's energy manager. It's been his leadership and his dedication that has allowed all of these awards to come to fruition. So his modesty usually precedes him, and it's fitting that he's first. It is a distinct honor and pleasure at this time to turn to another group that has earned a national award for our district. We have an exceptional partnership with the Carmel Police Department, and our school resource officers are just one portion of that wonderful partnership. To introduce and commend our SRO unit is Mr. Steve Dillon, our Director of Student Services, and I would note Chief Green from the Carmel Police Department and his officers who are with him will be introduced by Dr. Dillon at this time. Dr. Dillon.
Thank you, Dr. Swenson, members of the board. It is absolutely my pleasure tonight to share with you this wonderful news. One of my jobs as Director of Student Services is to oversee the district's school safety program, and I will tell you that I have a lot of help in that. I actually thought about bringing some policies tonight for your consideration. I didn't figure you would turn me down, but no. About 10 years ago, I took over my job, and we had one school resource officer, one officer at the high school. We really didn't know what we were going to do with that program. It was kind of brand new, and since then it has grown into 4 school resource officers, 2 uniformed police officers, and 1 Carmel Clay school police officer, all under the direction of the school resource unit. And this year, I'm proud to tell you that they have received national recognition at the National School Resource Officers Convention this past summer. So I'd like to introduce Chief Green, who will do the rest of our introductions.
Thank you, Steve. And we certainly do appreciate being invited and acknowledged. And, I'm going to introduce our unit that consists of a number of officers who are both assigned to the schools and then who supervise. First off is Lieutenant Jeff Horner on the end here. Lieutenant Horner is the overall supervisor of our School Resource Officer unit. Standing next to him is Sergeant Phil Hobson. He's our School Resource Officer at the high school, and also as Sergeant on the department, he oversees and directly supervises the 3 other officers. Next to him is Officer Craig DeWalt. He's a School Resource Officer assigned to Clay Middle School. Next to him is Wendy Bodenhorn. She's a School Resource Officer assigned to Creekside. And then next to her is DJ Sheff, last but not at the least, who's assigned at the Carmel Middle School as a School Resource Officer. These folks are the ones who are at the schools every day. They've developed the relationships over the years with the staff, the principals, the teachers. They're part of the day-to-day life at each of the schools. And they do everything that brought us, I guess, to be acknowledged by the National Association of School Resource Officers, and we were given that award out in Reno last month, and we all attended and received that on behalf of the department. And I certainly am very proud of these officers here and the relationship and the program that we have with the school system. Our relationship is one that continues to grow. We continue to find ways to work with each other for the same goal, and that certainly makes my job as chief certainly a lot easier, and I really am honored to stand here and be part of this award. So congratulations to everyone.
Shake hands, Chief. Thank you, guys. You guys are welcome. Thank you.
It's next my great honor to myself present a couple of very important awards. The Indiana School Boards Association annually provides the opportunity for superintendents to nominate members of the administrative staff in a school district whose service, whose exemplary professionalism, and whose outstanding efforts on behalf of students and staff are standout throughout the state and in many ways throughout our profession. It is my great honor to let everyone here know that that award is known as the Lauren A. Burt Award. And it's one of those awards that only very rarely is a professional nominated for, and the Indiana School Boards Association takes very seriously. I'm delighted this evening to let you know that the Carmel Clay Schools has nominated our very own Roger McMichael for the Lauren A. Burt Award. And Roger, you're now supposed to come here and shake my hand because he, over 2 decades, almost 2 decades of service to this district, has made himself and our district into a model of fiscal efficiency. And so therefore, as he appears magically from behind the screen, I congratulate him for his service. And you get to go shake hands. We conclude our awards with an award that's only given very rarely, and that is the Superintendent's Award. And I'm only holding it here because the globe on the top it actually comes out, so I wanted to show it to everyone, and then I'm going to put it down. The Superintendent's Award is given, again, very rarely, to honor a great idea. And the person who receives this award this evening truly had a great idea and is responsible for leading, for sustaining, and, in fact, for pioneering an idea that finally has come to fruition, of course, not only in the Carmel Clay Schools, where it has been alive and well since she first started this program. And I think she'll probably correct me. It wasn't actually at the Collegewood building. It was perhaps at the church across the street from the high school. I'll let her perhaps say a couple of words if she would like to. I tried to catch up on the history, and I'm not sure that I was absolutely right about that. But the bottom line is the idea that our recipient of this award was responsible for is kindergarten. There is no question that front-loading success for children is really the key to the rest of their school lives and so much that they do as individuals when they become adults. Mrs. Peggy Reeves, the very first kindergarten teacher in the Carmel Clay Schools, I believe was asked by, please Peggy, come on up, I believe was asked by Dr. Bob Hartman. Am I correct?
It was really Superintendent Stoops.
Superintendent Stoops, you see, I continue to learn.
It's a long way.
Well, it's a long way back, but in honoring Peggy and saluting her significant contribution to this district, to thousands of children, because now, finally, the state of Indiana, Peggy's caught up with you. Because now, as I hope everyone knows, every child in our state has the opportunity to do what she knew was the right thing a couple of years ago. A couple, yes. And for those of you who don't know, her graciousness, her professionalism, her intellect, and her great compassion really led and inspired so many students and so many colleagues. Because unless I'm totally off base, which I don't think I am, many of your colleagues from that time period are here to honor you as well. And colleagues would...
Clumsy.
Well, yes, no, I know. And please, this is very heavy, and so I'm going to ask perhaps one of Peggy's colleagues who might shepherd this award. We can put it back in its container, and certainly well-deserving of that standing ovation, but her impact and her absolutely wonderful influence on our district absolutely deserve to be saluted. So I hope you will join me as she goes forward to shake hands with the boards in one more round of applause for our Superintendent's Award winner.
I would like to say my principal's here, Jim Moore, and without that, the school faculty that I work with, kindergarten just wouldn't have existed because they backed me up all the way. We did start in the junior high, and the junior high was open that first year, and I know that George Owens, the principal, was not really anxious to see everything move to the garden. Junior high, but he did. He made it. Thank you.
And on that wonderful note, we're going to take a few minutes break. So if there are students here that need to get home and study, or a little socialization that needs to happen with our wonderful honorees, please do so. We'll take 2 minutes and then we'll resume our meeting. Thank you. Are we, I'm going to tap. Are we ready? Okay. Okay, we're going to resume. Next on our agenda, we have public participation. Just as a reminder, when you have the opportunity to go up, please state your name, your address, and you have 2 minutes to speak. We aren't going to kick you from the podium, but if you could stay within that 2 minutes, that would be fantastic. The board will listen very reflectively, and you have an opportunity to share your concerns and thoughts. So we will go ahead and get started with Candy Gansel.
I'm I'm Candy Gansel. I live at 558 Amberleaf Trail in Westfield. I'm from Forestdale Elementary. I'm currently teaching 2-3 gifted and talented. I have previously taught kindergarten, first grade, and looped from kindergarten to first grade. I'm here to share my enthusiasm and love for technology and ask the school board and administration to support the purchase and use of advanced technology in the classroom by innovative and excited teachers like me. I have always been interested in technology in the classroom and received a golden apple from IPL for podcasting with first graders. I also won a Lilly Teacher Fellowship, and because of that, each summer I attended camp workshop with teachers from around the state who have also won grants. During these summers, it has greatly surprised me how far along other school districts the same size and smaller than Carmel are in incorporating technologies such as iPads, Promethean boards, and Mobies. If our students had greater access to these types of advanced technology, Carmel schools could see greater student engagement and academic gains. Since iPads are high-tech, student-friendly, and relatively economical, I will focus on how they might be used in the classroom. The types of things that can be accomplished with iPads are: children can have digital portfolios of work which parents could view, writing samples and reading samples. Through the use of internet, students could use interactive science and math sites. Using iBook Author, students would also be able to make interactive books with video research, graphs, photos, and drawings done by them. Everyday math apps would be used to complete the Everyday Math series or complement the Everyday Math series. Teachers could bring traditional science journals into the 21st century by having students use iPads to take photographs, document experiments, type their observations, and draw diagrams. Students' oral reading fluency could be improved through the use of voice recordings that they listen to and analyze with their teacher. Students could also make QR codes, as I did last year with first graders using my personal iPad, and you have that on your handout. You need to read the first page first that I have given you. Given the opportunity, I envision fully integrating new technology into daily classroom instruction and using it regularly to motivate, support, and enrich student learning. School board members, as you meet to discuss allocations for funds and make budget decisions, please seriously consider making the purchase of advanced technology a high priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Laura Guntz.
Good evening. My name is Laura Guntz. I live at 11228 Armand Drive here in Carmel. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to the board. I am here on behalf of Woodbrook Elementary first grade parents, and we have quite a few of us here today. I don't know if you want to stand to show our support. Basically, I moved to Carmel about 7 years ago because we wanted the housing and we wanted the schools. We wanted the education. We lived in Marion County before that. And I know that I'm not alone, that a lot of families do move to Carmel for the education opportunities. I love Woodbrook Elementary. I am a huge fan. I think our staff is excellent. It's outstanding. I have 2 third graders, one in the challenge program and one in regular third grade. I have a first grader, and I have a son who'll be in kindergarten next year. I speak very fondly of Woodbrook to everybody I know. I love it. On that note, though, this year we're a little concerned because the size of our first grade class has gotten to be a little bit large. There are currently 76 first graders. That number might be 77. I heard there's somebody who moved into the district. And we have 3 teachers. So we are 25, 25, and 26 per class. And this is down from 4 teachers in the previous years. When my third graders were there were 4 teachers, and we tragically lost Patty Appleson. We were very fortunate one of my daughters did have her. So it's a little disconcerting that we have these 6-year-olds in such large rooms. Granted, they have excellent teachers and we have confidence in our teachers. We're concerned that our teachers are going to be spread too thin. We're concerned that our children are going to not have as an effective education as they could if they had a smaller class size. There's research. I have a study here printed out. I don't understand the statistics part of it, but there's all that in documentation proving that the smaller the class size, the more benefit there is as these children get older. One of the big points that I wanted to make tonight, we have 3 teachers for first grade. For third through 5th grade, we have 4 teachers, and those class sizes are 18 to 21 children. So I'm just wondering what the justification is for having larger class sizes with the younger children and having smaller class sizes with the older children who don't need as much help with little daily tasks, going to the bathroom, getting their supplies out, getting logged in on their computers during computer time, all these things that take away from the instructional time that our teachers aren't able to provide to our students because they're having to deal with a large number of very, very young children who still want to give their teacher a hug and tell their teacher about their day, and they're going to miss out on a lot of those opportunities. I do have the petition signed. I don't know if am I allowed to pass that out to you right now, or should I wait until later? It's my first time doing this, so. Okay.
Thank you. Next, we have Dennis Molk.
Hello, my name is Dennis Mock, and I, along with my wife Jessie, we moved to Carmel 3 weeks ago, and have a child, Charlie, in the first grade, Sophie's in kindergarten, and when we made this decision to move to Indiana, we struggled. Zionsville, Washington Township, and one of the big decisions we made in coming to Carmel was based upon the reputation of your schools and the research we did as far as class sizes. That's our concern also. Everything we saw was 20 to 22 kids in the class size. And it's been a wonderful entry into your community. Everything we've experienced has been positive except that. And we made the decision, private versus public. And Mrs. Davis, the staff, has been very warm to us. We have nothing negative to say about our entry here, except we're concerned about that class size. We'd like you to consider pulling some of your vast resources. You all have so much to be proud of in this community. You've done such a great job. We think it's very critical at this first grade that we put the resources where they belong and get the class size down. I thank you for this opportunity to talk to you. We appreciate it. We look forward to being valuable citizens in the community. We moved from Rhode Island. Don't worry, I raised my Charlie to be a Colts fan. He was disappointed we weren't moving to Denver, but he has a Luck jersey on and everything, and so we trust that you'll do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Heather, I think, Guillen?
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Heather Guillen. I live at 5888 Pebble Stream Drive here in Carmel. Oh boy, if you would have asked me 4 weeks ago if I would have been sending out a petition to everybody in Woodbrook, I don't know what I would have said. I would have said you were crazy. I am truly an introverted person that dreams of being extroverted because I have a lot of opinions. Clearly, I mean, as demonstrated tonight, we are an outstanding community. The awards, 2 people that had a perfect score on ACT, unheard of. Woodbrook, look at all of the awards Woodbrook has gotten. So many first grade families that I have talked to in the last week have said to me, not only did I choose Carmel, but I chose Woodbrook. It's been an outstanding school for, I don't know, well over a decade. I've only lived here 3 years, so still trying to become that Colts fan. But anyways, what I want to hit upon is specifically, first of all, with that petition. I had 33 emails of families to contact. I got 64% response since last Wednesday when it went out. Second, I want to point out that doing all of our research, we saw that 24 states have mandates about class sizes. I'm not recommending a mandate. I see the errors in so many of those ways, not to mention that they're trying to target K through 12th grade. That's not the answer. Research shows that front-loading those early years are critical. Kindergarten through 3rd grade make the difference. That's one thing that our current presidential candidates can agree upon. It's currently in the news. That's the one thing they agree upon. Resources, that's another debate. But anyways, the research is there to show that. And we have the resources. We have that classroom. We have the desks. We have the books. We have the children eager and ready to learn. Every parent that's speaking here tonight that had a kindergarten in Woodbrook last year volunteered firsthand in their classrooms. There was a kindergarten teacher and there was a full-time aide. I witnessed a child getting kicked in the nose, got a bloody nose because it was so out of control. Their energy, their spirit, they're still trying to learn to contain themselves. So again, how much time out of the day of a teacher is being taken to just maintain control and teaching them how to learn versus these are the facts, here's addition, subtraction, here's how you read the word the, hopefully most of them have that at this point. But there's a lot of learning to go, and I so hope that you will take all 64% of the families that we could reach and get their signatures. And beyond that, we had 108 people signing that petition. So thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Next, Alyssa Faust-Hale.
Hi, good evening. I live at 12478 Pebble Knoll Way in Carmel. I also have a first grade student at Woodbrook Elementary, and I think what makes me a bit unique too, as a profession, I am a clinical psychologist. I have been working with children, adolescents, and their families in private practice for about 10 years now, and on a daily basis I hear quite a bit about school and about school settings, about peer relationships, about teachers. Just this afternoon, I heard a few stories, indeed. So this particular cause is also near and dear to my heart because, again, research shows that front-loading the educational support in the early grades is key. I did some research this afternoon, and the article in the Early Childhood Research and Practice Journal, there was an article stating that children come into the young elementary school years with many different needs. They are at many different skill levels, and they come in with different learning histories. Most children at one time or another in their development can be classified as at risk during these early years. Not at risk in terms necessarily as SES, but also in terms of, personal things going on in their homes, personal stressors. Children come from divorced families. They come from families with both parents working. They come from families with a single parent raising them. They have little needs that need to be met on a daily basis. Their dog might pass away. They might be extra upset about other things. Really, I think rather than just look at the research in terms of reading skills and other things that can be improved when we have a small class size, because the research is there according to the STAR study out of Texas, which is our hallmark study when looking at class size. But I am also really focused on the little nuances that a teacher who can develop a one-on-one relationship with a particular child is able to make more of an impact. I think socially children will develop better in a smaller classroom setting. I believe emotionally they will develop better. They will get more of a handle in terms of problem-solving skills, coping skills, definitely peer relationships. If a child is being bullied, I think there's more of an opportunity for that teacher to just be more cognizant of what's going on in her classroom and, to be able to definitely intervene. I believe that Woodbrook is doing a fantastic job. As we have all stated, I love Woodbrook. So many things are going very well in that school. I think that school really does add a lot of personal touches for the kiddos. I think Mrs. Davis is a fabulous leader. However, I think, again, experience excellence, explore opportunities, and realize potential. I'm happy to be part of a very good district, but I want to be part of a very excellent district, and I want to be part of an excellent first grade experience for my child and all the other first graders out there at Woodbrook. And we do have the classroom space, and we did have a first grade teacher until recently, so I really appreciate your consideration with this matter.
Thank you. The last of our speakers is Molly Smith, but it is also noted on the bottom, request to speak after others have spoken if needed. So,
thanks for sharing that. I won't take up too much of your time. I don't want to be redundant. My name is Molly Smith. I live at 5230 Lake Point Drive in Carmel. My daughter's in first grade. I just want to say that we love Woodbrook, and we moved here 15 years ago, and I've heard nothing but wonderful things about Woodbrook. Things like, oh, you're going to love Woodbrook. That is the best school. That is the best school in the district. And all I want to say is I just want to continue that excellence at Woodbrook and the best opportunities for our children. We all want that. I know everybody has to make difficult decisions, but if we didn't come out and voice our concerns, you wouldn't know that we were concerned. So appreciate you listening to us, and we just hope for good outcome in the future and down the road in the future years that we can, continue the excellence at Woodbrook and have the best for our kids. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on with the agenda, we have consent. Do I have a motion to approve consent?
I'll move.
Second.
Discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving consent, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Next, we have action items, and for our first action item, we turn to Mr. McMichael.
Thank you. As the board is aware, at the last meeting, I presented all of our budgets for 2013, as well as our 3-year capital projects plan and 12-year bus replacement plan. This evening, I'm asking for the board's authorization to advertise for a public hearing on these various budgets and plans, which will then give opportunity for comment by the general public to the board. While we had some conversation and some discussion about these budgets and plans at the last meeting, this is also an opportunity for the board to ask other questions that you might have, and hopefully I'll be able to respond and answer those questions. I'll certainly give that a try, so perhaps we can start with that.
I move to permit the advertising of the public hearing for the budgets.
Second.
Okay. Discussion.
I have a couple questions. Just briefly, Roger. On the presentation you gave us last time, the PowerPoint, which was very nicely done, by the way, on page 7 of that, and you may have to refer to that, but you may not.
Okay.
It talked about, it's the estimate of revenue, and it has a line item of full-day kindergarten grant, and I just thought you could talk a little bit about how that's different this year with extra money, and also in comparison to the allocated funds that Carmel Clay puts into kindergarten and how those relate.
Yes, up until this school year, and for the past several years, I don't recall exactly when we started, but Carmel has been offering full-day kindergarten for a number of years to parents and there was a fee associated with that because the state, until just this year, did not fully fund that program. They funded a half-day program, as they had, of course, for years and years, and there was some additional monies provided that could go toward funding full-day kindergarten, but it did not cover the cost. So for years there was a fee, and the fee varied based on really how much money came from the state, and but it was a significant amount. I believe that last year it was somewhere in the range of maybe $1,700 somewhere for the parent per year, and so that has been, in the past, that's how full-day kindergarten was funded, and in spite of a significant contribution on the part of the parent, we had very good response and somewhere in the 70 to 80% participation rate. Now, going forward, the good news is that the state is providing considerably more money than they did in the past. And I'm being a little careful here because most people have read in the paper that kindergarten now is fully funded. And so whether or not it's fully funded, I would say, depends on what school district you're in. And because school districts do spend varying amounts for programs, and Carmel, for example, in its full-day kindergarten, we have always provided, in addition to the teacher, we've also provided a full-time instructional assistant in that classroom. And so our total cost is not, in fact, fully funded by the state. However, we're very appreciative that the money has been significantly increased, and it's been increased to $2,400, additional money for $2,400 per student. And so the good news is that is on a per student. Oftentimes, and including in the recent past, programs are often funded with a total amount of money that the state allocates, for example, for kindergarten, and then depending upon the participation, a school district will finally get more or less per student based on the participation. And so since we never know, of course, how many students are actually going, across the state, are going to attend full-day kindergarten. We had no way of knowing how much final subsidy was going to be available, and thus it made it difficult as to how much to charge the parents and so forth. So this time around, a very positive thing is that the state has funded this on $2,400 per student, essentially regardless of what the cost is. And so now they kind of turned that around, and so that now the state didn't know exactly what this was going to cost. And I would say that that's commendable, I think, on the part of the state legislature, that they did see fit to fund it in the manner in which they did. As I said, however, I've estimated that we're somewhere in $250,000 to $300,000 perhaps short, if you will, in terms of our actual cost for the program. We elected to not adjust the program, however. We continued to provide full-time assistance in every classroom and so forth. And so the structure of our program did not change as a result of the change in funding. And by the way, you could not, one of the conditions was that a school district could not continue to charge parents if you accepted the money from the state, then there could be no charge to the parent beyond just the standard regular fees for classroom materials and so forth. And so that is we now have that program implemented, and we certainly expect continued success with that. But it was a significant change and a significant increase of funding on that particular program.
I appreciate that explanation. I appreciate the question, too, because there is a real misimpression, I think, in the community about whether kindergarten has been fully funded. If I could ask one follow-up question to your explanation, is the $2,400 per student, is that a Carmel figure, or is that the same figure that's used in other districts throughout the state?
No, that's $2,400. It's across the state, and so and that has good and bad implications as well, because in over 300 school districts, there's over 300 different salary schedules, for example, and so we don't all pay the same, and there's a whole a number of variables associated with staffing at school, and so again, that amount comes closer in some school districts of funding than it would in others. Depends on class size, obviously. The lower your class size, the farther that money goes, and so again, we did not make any changes to our program really when the additional money came about this year.
I do have one additional question, but it doesn't have anything to do with kindergarten.
Oh, I just wanted to finish up.
Okay.
The kindergarten figure, though, is for the second half of the kindergarten day, because half of kindergarten was already fully funded, right?
Well,
I mean, they funded half-day kindergarten.
yes, I hesitated because the first half of kindergarten is funded as a part of the overall funding formula for the school district. And so unlike now the second half of the day, which is funded is very targeted and very specific and only for kindergarten, the first half of the day is just a part of our overall funding. And so as to whether it's fully funded, again, it depends on the composition of the class and the salaries that happen to be paid and all of those things. I would say that as you look in the complexities of a school corporation, there are certainly some programs that are much more expensive than others, and you can imagine what some of those programs might be. But the funding in the overall general operating budget is we finally reduce it to an amount per student. But the fact is life's not really that simple, and within that total $100 million budget, there's a significant variation from one program to the next, even from elementary versus high school and middle school. Clearly the cost per student's not, the number is just an average number. It's not per program.
Here's my additional. This actually has to do with the Capital Projects Fund, and it was just an observation In the past few capital projects fund plans that we've had over the past few years, the major project section, not the whole capital projects fund, but the major projects tended to go between the, fall between the 3.5 million and 4 million range. And these 3 years seem to be slightly less. Not so much this year, which I know is more solidly in place, but is that a reflection of any kind of tax or a redistribution of money we're putting to different projects, or just?
No, it's really none of those in particular. The part of it is there are some years where we may have accumulated money from a prior year, and then when we're actually doing the project, there may have been some carryover money from the prior year. So in some cases, that may be part of the explanation. The funding in the capital projects for the past 3 or 4 years, I'll say, has been pretty consistent. However, it has been impacted by the recession because the funding formula for the capital projects and the control on that is based on a maximum tax rate. And so even in Carmel, our overall assessed value has declined the last 2 years. It is projected, unfortunately, to decline again this year. And so as a result of that, the actual dollars that are generated with that maximum tax rate have declined the last 2 years and very well may decline this year as well. That's entirely driven by the impact of the recession. However, about 4 years ago, or thereabouts, when reassessment took place, and some of you may remember when there was a lot of changes in your property taxes and so, and I'm not talking about the other impacts such as the circuit breaker, but when that reassessment took place, Carmel Schools, as an example, lost $3 million in our capital fund. Now, to put that in context, we have a capital fund that's in the range of $16 million. So that was a significant loss of revenue. And every district across the state, in some form or other, experienced that. And it did vary based on their actual ending assessments and so forth. But we've never recovered from that. I mean, it's not like there was anything ever done to kind of make up for that. So that, along with some other legislative actions, such as the circuit breaker concept, have made us very happy as taxpayers, because there's no question that taxes and property taxes in the state of Indiana have declined. My concern is that there's a delay between that decline and the impact of that decline, and I have concern that governmental entities collectively will not be able to deliver the same level of services that most of us have grown accustomed to with the kind of significant reductions that we have had. Carmel, again, is fortunate in that regard that the reductions here, due to some of those measures, have been really very minimal as compared to some of our neighbors and other districts across the state, because we already have a very low and enviable tax rate.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. That's
Great. Mr. Phillips?
Yes, thank you, Leila. Roger, we have a lot of people in the audience that are intently interested in class sizes, so what can you share with all of us about the impact of this budget on class sizes, particularly in our elementary schools?
Well, first I would say that generally speaking, school districts, including Carmel, spend all the money that we get. We don't really have any reason to keep it. We try to maintain a certain operating balance and so forth, but generally speaking, we're in the business of using the money that's made available. And in the course of doing that, and particularly in our operating fund, and this goes to the class size issue, about 94% of our operating budget is spent on personnel, and as you would imagine, a significant portion of that is teaching personnel specifically. And so as we make decisions as to how we're going to use money, it really comes down in large measure to how much we're going to pay people and then how many people we're going to pay. The formula is really very simple, although it's difficult and complex to apply. But that's
that's really what it, in large measure, comes down to. And so, in the early summer and as we approach the beginning of school, there are a number of people that, some of which are sitting around this table, certainly, that all of which are sitting around this table, or not all, but certainly everybody here, is very, aware and involved in monitoring our class sizes. Some of it, there's some estimates because we don't know exactly how many children are going to show up first day of school. But a very significant part is kind of where they show up in not only what school, but what grade level. And so it's a factor of how many students, but it's also a factor of what age they are. And sometimes we have what we consider good years where the kids kind of show up just where we would like for them to show up, and other times they don't. Now, there are some school districts that actually, I've worked in a school district where they literally closed the door of the school and they said, we're full and we're going to send you someplace else that has room in that classroom. And so that has a positive of kind of managing the class size, but you can imagine the negative in terms of being kind of bounced around a school district. So I'm not recommending that by any means, but there are a number of approaches to that. But it really comes down to the fact that we do use the money that we have available to us, and in this discussion, it really gets down to how many people we're in a position to hire.
And of course, we're somewhat at the mercy of the state legislature.
Yeah, we're totally at the mercy. Financially, we're really totally now at the mercy of the state legislature, as our operating fund is entirely funded by a state. We call it a state grant, but it's money coming entirely from the state, from sales and income tax. And of course, one of the other things that happens when we have the class size discussion, that class in first grade at Woodbrook, it's pretty basic math. There's a point where, when we add another teacher, then the class sizes go from being the highest oftentimes to the lowest, and that's just obviously the way that works. And sometimes, unfortunately, there's always a line somewhere that we just we stop, and regrettably, there's a point where if 2 or 3 more children showed up, it might have been the breaking point where we would look to add another teacher. But again, we can't just do that because the numbers add up. There's still that question as to, how's the budget work and the finances for it. So again, even that's not as simplistic as you get to some magic number and you just add another student. Now, certainly we get more. The more students we have, the more money we get, which is only appropriate.
One last piece of the question. Maybe this would be speculation, but just hypothetically, if this community had not passed the referendum, what kinds of class sizes would we be looking at then?
I really wouldn't even want to speculate, but I can make a couple comments about our referendum, and that is that, number one, this community saw fit to tax themselves and increase the school tax rate 20% with that referendum. So we have a 79-cent tax rate, and 16 cents of that 79 cents is for the operating referendum. We're one of, I believe, 16 school districts that were successful, communities that were successful in passing referendums, and the amount, of course, varied from district to district. There was at least another 16 that failed, and some of them have failed twice. So if you begin to imagine trying to reduce our operation, even a $100 million operation, trying to reduce that operation over $12 million, and again, if you do some basic math as to what you might think a teacher would cost, not that we would just reduce teachers if we lost $12 million, but the fact is that's a significant majority of our staff, and so we undoubtedly would touch everything across the district, but the loss of that amount of money would be just absolutely devastating to the district. And we oftentimes want to know, well, how would that raise class sizes? Well, answer is I really don't know, but I can assure you that it would involve not only much larger class sizes, but much less resources of every kind, from everything from and most of it's personnel, because that's where we spend most of our money, and some of the percentage of the other 6% that's not personnel is we have very little control over, such as utilities, for example. We try to do the best job we can, but, we spend $4 million a year in utilities. So it would have absolutely would be devastating to the district and certainly to the community had that referendum failed.
I'm sorry, a quick point of clarification. I may be wrong, Roger, but you used the phrase $100 million. That's combined budgets, correct? That's not our operating budget.
No, that is our operating budget.
So the operating budget is what is our operating budget, 90s?
It's in our general fund and our referendum fund, both of which are really what I'd refer to as our operating budget. Many people, when they're talking about school budgets, that's really the budget that they're talking about. They're not talking about a transportation budget or a building facilities or a debt repayment budget. Those certainly are all significant, but no, our operating budget's in the neighborhood of just under $100 million between the combined total of our general fund and our referendum.
That was my clarification. It's 100 including the referendum.
Yes,
fund.
yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions, discussion? Okay. Well then, we need to take a vote to publicize the hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Roger.
Next, we have changes in book rental fees and we have draft accounts.
Good evening. At the last board meeting, you were kind enough to approve the adoption of 3 new titles for the 4-5 gifted and talented class, and so that did cause an increase in book rental, so that is what is before you this evening. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. May I get a motion on the table to discuss? So moved. Second?
Second.
Questions?
I had a question. Can't read the small printing right now, but it appeared, hold on a minute, that the price appears for 1 year only. Are these consumables?
They
or-
are, yes.
Okay. Get
Any
Thank
other
you.
questions? Yes.
Dr. Thompson, I know you've answered this question before, but for fees like this, if we have a family, let's say where the child is on free or reduced lunch, is there some provision to help that family with these fees?
Yes, absolutely. And actually, Mr. McMichael can probably address that a little better than I can, because he can explain how the book rental and fees work for families who are on free and reduced lunch.
Yeah, essentially, families that qualify for free or reduced lunch are entitled to have their fees waived. And in this community, by the way, that's about 10% of our student population.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next, we have wage payment agreement. Dr. Swenson.
Thank you, Madam President. You have before you, in pursuit of Indiana Code, a collaborative agreement that we would like your support for, a wage payment agreement, which in essence establishes pay periods for our teachers, and that number would be a choice by the teacher between 26 pays or 21 pays. Certainly a teacher would remain on their selected pay period unless they requested a change, but certainly in this agreement, if signed, as you see from the actual agreement, does not construe any waiver of a claim by our Teachers Association that it could be included in any collective bargaining agreement that we might arrive at as part of our current negotiations process. But certainly this is consistent with the law. I think it's obviously mutually agreed to and therefore very positive, and we would urge your approval.
Okay, recommendation to bring this to the table for discussion.
I'll move.
Second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Niles. Discussion,
One question.
please.
On number 2, it says teachers will remain on their selected pay period unless they send this information to the Director of Human Resources prior to August 1st. I assume that date this year will be different?
Yes, is the answer, but I'm not sure which date would in fact be applicable.
Yeah, I don't know that we discussed a specific date that would take effect for this year. Obviously, this is coming for the board's approval and came with CCA's approval after August 1st. I think in essence, the attempt to maintain some portions of our previous contract language in this regard was the effort here. As Dr. Swenson said, this is an issue that the State Board of Accounts has said can no longer stay in our teacher's contract, so we felt it was imperative to attempt to reach an agreement outside of the contract to, in essence, enable our past practices to continue in terms of 26 versus 21 pays. To be honest with you, Mrs. Nowes, I would venture to guess that the majority of teachers who might have wanted to change probably would have assumed, not saying right or wrong, but that the past contract language in that regard was still in place. So I think they would have notified us. Certainly, I think I speak for Dr. Swenson when I say that we would seek to work with CCA if there are any members, any teachers who now want to because of this new agreement, which is in essence a rewording of what was in the contract previously. I think we'd work with them in that regard.
Okay, I was just worried about new teachers as well who may not have any idea.
Yeah, I can speak to new teachers that, as so many things have changed with the law and the way this is kind of developed, this is an issue that really came to the forefront after we had hired the majority of our new teachers. So our office, in essence, when the new teachers came on board, we presented to them a pay period election form, like we would have done in the past, which said you have 26 versus 21 pays as an option. They selected an option. I assume even those that were hired, in June, probably wouldn't have changed their mind before August 1st. But that's a fair point. We would certainly seek to work together.
Yeah, because this is coming to fruition after August 1st, which is already passed. So.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Spangenberg. Just a note of appreciation to Jeff and his administrative team, and also to the association for working together to make this happen.
Okay. Are we ready for a vote? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next, we're moving on to discussion with the strategic plan subgoal number 3. If we'd like to convene around the table below, we will do so. Pardon? I'll bring your chair. Oh, you are. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm a little up here, my computer shut down, so. Reload.
Well, that's okay. I'll just say a few words. As you are getting... You just have to talk. Oh, okay. Hello? Testing, testing. Okay. All I really wanted to share was that over the course of the last couple years, we've been working on developing a strategic plan. We have had input from a variety of stakeholders, including teachers and parents, community members without students in the school system. And as of June, we had presented to us the strategic plan that came out of all of these surveys and discussions. We have 3 sub-goals, and we've discussed back in July and in August each of the other sub-goal 2 and 3, or 1 and 2. And then tonight we're going to be discussing sub-goal number 3, which primarily focuses on utilizing technology to support the strategic plan. So as we get started, we will be moving forward.
It's actually part of our energy conservation plan that the computer is auto shut down every evening at 6:30 when we're in use, so that's what happens. Gotcha. Help us on those. I see it. No, that's later. Oh.
Sub-goal 3, that's it. That's the strat plan, sub-goal 3. One more.
There you go.
I think you have to say, okay. All right.
Uh-oh. Don't bother. Say exit. No, you can't.
Yeah, I heard that.
I just.
Well, something exciting that we've been doing in the school system, which just started today, is the launch of Cookies and Conversation. Okay. We launched Cookies and Conversation, which gives the administration and the school board an opportunity to go into each of the schools and have conversations with the teachers and their administration. Very open-ended. There isn't any agenda that we follow. It is just an opportunity to chat and discuss and to share ideas. We launched today at Smoky Row Elementary, and that went quite well. It was very enjoyable. And are we ready to get started?
Yeah.
Woohoo! All righty.
Yes. Behaving rather strangely, but with Christy Cloud's help, since Amy Dudley is ill, but Christy and her team have worked magnificently on this sub-goal 3, which is use technology as a tool for learning, productivity, communication, and data solutions. We will roll through. There was some trepidation amongst the staff when I informed everyone I'm going to make this presentation, because sometimes I believe my colleagues think this is what I perceive to be the latest in technology. I can assure you that their administrations and encouragement have, in fact, educated me to realize that, in fact, these strategies, which we will discuss, are far more, in fact, where we're headed in terms of technology. Strategy 1, in terms of this sub-goal, is to develop and clearly communicate staff and student expectations for the use of technology. Everyone will recall from our previous presentations that in addition to the strategy, of course, for each part of the sub-goal, we have expected outcomes and then a monitoring tool. Those expected outcomes, as you see, are listed, and then the monitoring tool, the expectation documentation, would also be part of this. And I don't know, Mrs. Cloud, if you have any additional thoughts to add to that as prior to any board questions.
What I would say about the monitoring tool here is that currently we don't really have a set of expectations that involve technology for either students or staff. The state of Indiana has adopted the NETS standards for technology standards for students, but we have not formally adopted those as a school district. We've always relied upon the standards which are embedded in the state of Indiana standards, or in this case in the Common Core standards. But there's not been a set of expectations out of the Human Resource Department or out of the Curriculum Department that clearly defines exactly what does a teacher need to be able to know and do with students as far as technology is concerned. So that's what we're hoping to achieve with this first goal.
And I would note as well, as the board knows, we are anticipating the development of our new technology plan. So, as Mrs. Cloud has just articulated, we really have the opportunity before us within the next 12 to 15 months to rivet these expectations to the various pieces of the strategy and the expected outcomes that we're developing here as part of this plan. Questions or thoughts here?
Thank you. I was hoping perhaps, even though these expectations are still a work in progress, you could maybe give some examples of what's meant by expectations of students or staff.
And actually, to be clear, the document hasn't been started yet because we would be waiting on, obviously, you guys to adopt this formally as part of your strategic plan before we would begin that. But some expectations that might exist are students to be proficient at keyboarding by 3rd or 4th grade, such as exist in the Common Core standards? Is there expectation that a staff member has a web page, or is that not an expectation? It may or may not be, depending on what our research says. Is it an expectation that students are able to navigate a website and do certain activities when they're on that website? So those are some examples of things that we might do.
My question, did I hear you correctly in stating that Indiana has adopted the NET standards?
Correct.
Okay. And is that from the DOE, or who adopted this? And
From
are
the
they
DOE.
suggesting that all of the districts also
Well,
adopt this?
And again, because we follow what the state of Indiana has done with the curriculum, we just have not put anything formally in place to say, yes, we use the NET standards in Carmel Clay Schools.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and this expectation documentation is what it says up there on the monitoring tool. Is there any expectation as to how much we are expecting the teachers to use technology in the classroom? And are we like, would there be like Technology Fridays, for example, or, just using it specifically every day?
Yeah, certainly, I think the first expectation really is, as technology is a tool for learning, as our textbooks, as are the spoken word, et cetera, it's really part of life and learning, therefore, so that I think I would refer back to Mrs. Cloud's proper point. We're still thinking about how to articulate these. There's quite clearly an expectation, really from all of us, that that's just part of how we accelerate learning. Candy Gansel's point about, working into a rigorous involvement with technology, I think we're there in many, many ways, but we certainly, through this part of this sub-goal, have the opportunity to boost, if you please, that involvement.
The one piece I would note as well in the RISE rubric for teachers, it actually only mentions the word technology one time in that entire document, but I think if you read through the document, you're not able to be highly effective or effective unless you're using technology in other ways. It just doesn't specifically come out and mention that, which I think aligns very well with how we've written policies and procedures in this district, because many times if a student violates inappropriate behavior with the computers, that is no different than if they placed graffiti on a wall. We haven't gotten to the level of writing every single document that has to apply specifically to technology, because we want those policies to teach students to be good citizens in life, whether they are involving technology or not involving technology.
Being a technologist myself and in the business occasionally of helping older colleagues to become proficient in the use of new tools, I'm aware of the resistance that sometimes is out there. So I guess this may be more a question for Ryan than for Christy, but what are our plans to help staff to meet these expectations, understanding that it's just not a matter of willing yourself to be able to do some of these things?
Sure, I think, and I don't mean to take it away from Ryan, but just to lead off, I think we already have a consistent and very effective professional development strategy that really incorporates just that learning curve for those of us who are still looking at the Underwood typewriter and drooling over its efficiency and effectiveness. Just kidding. But the bottom line is, I think it really is through professional development we've already supplied, and that we would supply in the future.
Yeah, I would echo those sentiments. I think actually you'd be surprised that Mrs. Cloud's department is a key player in that professional development that's delivered. There's an instructional specialist that works, who's a teacher, as the board knows, who works specifically with implementing technology and integrating technology into the classroom. And that's been something that's been in place for several years here. And I would just see that continuing. One of the things we marveled at this summer was the number of teachers who participated in professional development opportunities here in this building over the summer. And board members, that's right. So we would see, I don't mean to speak for Christy or for Dr. Dudley in curriculum instruction and assessment, but I think you would see that professional development continue. And obviously as the demand increases in terms of teachers being interested in wanting to participate, I think their team would meet the challenge of arranging professional development to meet those demands.
We move on then to strategy 2, which is to allocate resources to provide an infrastructure necessary to support student learning, productivity, communication, and data solutions. And the monitoring tool obviously is part of the budget and the technology plans. We've talked an awful lot about infrastructure, and we have, as Mrs. Cloud can provide more specifics than I, but the infrastructure improvement or expansion, if you please, that we've just experienced has been very helpful. But obviously, as we look to the future, some of the high-tech items that have even been mentioned here previously this evening by several of us are going to demand allocations and or expenditures of a, I guess I'm going to say, a hefty nature, and that's not to be discouraging about it, but while we have invested heavily in infrastructure for existing technology, there are things on the horizon that or even existence currently, that obviously will be part of our thinking in this plan. But Christy, I don't know, any additional thoughts?
As I know that we are planning to have an additional workshop topic on technology early in September to talk more specifically about that, I won't give away all the secrets to that presentation tonight, but we have just increased our bandwidth that we have available to us as a district. Last year we had 150 meg connection total in the district. We are now at 450 megs across the district, so we've upgraded that quite significantly. Now we need to make some additional network improvements, which I'll talk to you about during September. But in addition to just increasing the bandwidth, now we have to ensure that we have wireless capabilities everywhere throughout the district. Covering 1 million square feet at the high school has been quite an undertaking that we've been doing this summer as well.
Could you indicate what does it mean in practical terms to increase the bandwidth from whatever you said to whatever you said?
In practical terms, from 150 to 450, basically what we've done there is previously all of the traffic came through, traffic meaning internet connections came through the ESC, and we've now added a connection out at Creekside for two purposes. One, to allow redundancy so that if we do have a failure here at the ESC, we also have a backup location that we can implement. I won't tell you that it's working quite perfectly yet, but that's all part of our plan. We've never had that redundant structure that we will have in place as a result of this. And then in addition, one of the most recent surveys that we saw indicated that for every 1,000 users you have, you need a 100 meg connection. So we have over 17,000 users in this district if you count students and staff together. And so we have a long way to go to get there. But we know that this is a huge step compared to where we were a year ago. And just maybe, I'd look to Terry, 3 to 5 years ago, we were at only a 10 meg connection. So we went from 10 to 100, and now we've gone to from 100 to 450 over this summer.
And you might be covering this at a workshop, so if you just cut me off if you are, but curious about the plans then to get to that next step, to get to that, and what kind of budget allocations and where we fall there.
Okay. I can't speak specifically to how much that type of infrastructure would take to cost out going from 450 to several hundred more meg. But we obviously won't make that move until we get to the point where we are ready to expend that, because we don't want to be paying for that additional bandwidth that we're not using over time. So we'll continue to monitor this. We're using it about, I think the figures on 250 meg of the connection right now is at about 30% on a daily basis, so we have quite a ways to grow right now. We monitor that on a monthly basis to see how much it's growing, but the piece that we put in place this summer allows us to go all the way up to a gig connection. So it allows us to grow quite a bit more. It would cost additional money, but it won't require any rewiring for that to happen. As far as the bandwidth is concerned, now we'll talk about the network when we get to that September meeting, because that's still a concern.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
We move right along to strategy number 3, allocate resources to provide technology tools necessary to support student learning, productivity, communication, and data solutions. Part and parcel, I know what Christy and her team will be providing in consort with the rest of our CIA colleagues will be to talk about these tools, and the support of student learning obviously is a major task that we attempt every day in lots of different ways. I don't know, again, not wanting to give away any of the premises that you'll share with us. Any other notes briefly on that? Okay. And so I don't mean to suspend everyone's judgment on this, but there's a far more elaborate explication of that is in the offing.
Well, since you won't spoil the plot, how about just a teaser? What are one or two of these tools that can help us to understand something of what we're after here?
When we look at allocating resources for not only student learning, which might be something like our ALEX tool that we've put in place within the math curriculum to allow that differentiated learning, but then we're also looking at productivity tools, so that incorporates not only Microsoft Office, but within the last year we have then deployed Google Docs across the district, so that would be another example of a productivity tool. Communications and data solutions tools, you're familiar with the Pinnacle data warehouse that we have as a district, also PowerSchool, which is actually our student information systems. Both of those systems don't come without a yearly return cost over and over and over again. So all of those tools, even though we've put them in place, definitely come with a hefty price on each year, along with the support to keep them up and running and new things happening within them.
the board will remember that during our retreat, we talked about briefly some of those annual costs. Moving on to strategy 4, engage students in using technology as a tool for learning. This is obviously the ongoing aspect of what happens in great classrooms, labs throughout our district. And those outcomes certainly increase knowledge of integrating the technology into instruction, and that comes, as we've discussed very briefly, from our professional development activities. Certainly the technology embedded in instruction, as Mrs. Cloud has indicated, there are great things on the horizon. And just as a quick note, we have currently available to students and staff millions of dollars in technology already on site and in place, and of course used every day just as a normal part of how we educate, how students learn, and how we teach. And then certainly the increased knowledge of using technology to enhance learning, again, wraps up back to, okay, how do we help each other become more proficient, and then of course how do we engage our students more completely in that proficiency from their angle so that their learning is enhanced and advanced.
On that note, I was going to mention for the student engagement, we've been working a lot with teachers on the use of cell phones for acting as clicker technologies, because as you'll know, the board policy allows for teachers and students to use cell phones in their classroom, assuming that it's with teacher permission. So we've encouraged teachers to make use of that. We've worked with PTOs to fund Mobi solutions for schools, which are the interactive clicker type systems that they could use, or Mobi slates, right, that teachers can use within their classroom to really allow them to interact with kids in small group and not necessarily whole group instruction that might take place as well.
Okay. Along with this, when we engage students in using technology in learning, I know that special ed has had the opportunity to go for grants and pull some of the technology that they need into the classrooms for their students, such as iPads. For other teachers who may be out there also looking for grants and be able to pull technology into the classroom, we have enough to support that, and because we've increased the bandwidth at this time. So if they happen to bring tools of their own into the classroom, then we support that.
If they bring a tool of their own into the classroom, they can connect to either our guest or our CCS network, which then they have to be able to do that, because we obviously, with the staff that we have on hand, we cannot support every person bringing their own device and be able to connect it to our network. But they can choose to connect their own personal device to our network. Yes.
Okay, and I understand that would not be part of the replacement inventory, because
Correct.
that would be something that they've brought in on their own.
And that was similar to one of the questions that I had. Many of our students have their own devices, so are we developing either curriculum or specific things within our technology to support teachers utilizing what students already own?
That is one of our hopes, I think, through the strategic plan and through our work on the Project Speak Up survey last year, is that we are fortunate enough to be in a community where many students do have their own device. So rather than trying to institute a one-to-one initiative here where parents may feel like we already have an initiative, we already own a device, why do I now need to purchase a specific device, to really let us look at that and see if we can really support bring your own device in Carmel Clay schools. We have set up a zero proxy on our proxy server to make the connections for students and staff to that wireless network, and that's why we continue to increase the number of access points that we're putting into the schools, because right now if you bring in a device, it's not guaranteed that you're going to have connection flawlessly throughout your school. We have to continue to cover the square footage of those buildings.
Question is largely for Jeff, and I'm not sure it fits any of the strategies better than the others, but since we started talking about individual devices, it raises the issue of social media. Given that there's some tension between the increasing use of social media as a communication tool, could you offer a few comments about how we handle that in relation to making sure we encourage appropriate use of those tools in an educational setting?
Right. I think our first concern with much of the social media is security-based. Without going into detail, we've had students who have had very negative experiences based on context through social media. So without fail, we would not bring some other device or means by which students would have those contacts into a school setting. So I have talked at great length with Christy and with Terry Howell and with other colleagues, and when we can be more confident that we can be more secure, and that's not that we can't. As far as an instructional piece, there are some difficulties that present themselves that we have an obligation, if I understand what's the E-rate, which requires, in fact, that we, and I'm not going to get the language right, but do everything humanly possible to prevent the kinds of devastating things that can occur. Don't always occur, obviously. There's a great deal of potential. So we're still in a position where I don't know that we have perfect answers to help us to minimize to the extent that we really need to some of those very difficult situations that, while they haven't arisen through use of school equipment, they are an illustration, a caution, and a warning that we need to be very careful.
I just want to quickly ask Christy to touch upon other ways to collaborate with your, well, I was at the Google Docs presentation this summer, and despite the fact that some might think the only way to collaborate and to discuss is through social media, there's lots of other opportunities that are very safe and that the teachers could utilize. So if you'd like to just touch on that, that would be great.
Yes, we have, I would say, 2 that are fully embedded throughout the district where any teacher has easy access to those. That would be Google Docs, where students can share documents with their teachers and with each other. And then we also have a Moodle environment, and a Moodle is a course management system which allows teachers to create a course online and then to have students have dialogues, discussions, activities, journals, all of those types of things. Also, our high school colleagues have embraced Edmodo, which is a social media type solution, but it's specific to education. And so they're using that greatly at the high school. They've done quite a bit of PD on that and are using that kind of in place of Facebook because it works in the school environment.
When I was a student, did some Moodling, but it was spelled with an N back in those days, I think. Sorry. Christy, I note that under monitoring tool that we've mentioned your technology plan twice here so far, so it's obviously a key part of the strategic plan. Had the opportunity to admire the tremendous information that you put together. 32 pages of single-space technological wonders. I mean, it's just fantastic. I'm not going to lay a task on a staff person, but I would express a hope that maybe sometime for those of us who don't have the appetite for 32 pages, if perhaps just an executive summary could be a bit. Don't write that down. Okay, you have to clear it with Dr. Swenson first. Okay, but if something like that would be available, I can imagine that people in the community would be very, very interested to know the kinds of excellent things that you're planning to do.
And I think that will probably come best served when we rewrite the technology plan this year, because that plan that we have now expires with this year, and the new one will become part of this strategic plan. So that is certainly something we can consider and talk with Dr. Swenson about including in the new plan.
We move on to strategy number 5, which is use technology to enhance communication with stakeholders. The monitoring tools speak to, I think, the wealth of opportunities under the expected outcomes. While again, without giving away the whole presentation that you're going to receive later, our district has already made leaps and bounds worth of improvement and engagement in terms of these tools, and are instantly available to and instantly part of the communications with, in particular, parents and guardians, but also with citizens around the community with a variety of very important news items that we want to share. So I think this is certainly in place and certainly something that we would continue as part of this sub-goal to enhance.
In a previous meeting, Tricia Reynolds gave us a report on the use of Twitter and MyCCS as a communication device to parents and community members. At some point, will we get an update on whether we believe those efforts are improving our efforts at communication? Sure. I don't know, that may be part of the report at the workshop, but I'd love to hear Tricia's and your view as to whether, what progress we're making in that regard.
Yes.
I do have a question about the use of technology as a means to perhaps improve our listening to the community. I believe this district does a magnificently great job of communicating all the terrific things that are going on in the district, particularly since we've added Tricia Reynolds to our staff. She's done a fantastic job. Of course, she takes full advantage of a lot of technology to help people in the community to know what's going on. But if we think of the other side of communication, of bringing feedback from our customers, if you will, back into our decision-making process, I'd be very interested to know if there are some tools out there that would help the district become.
Sure. Just a quick example as to how Tricia is getting some feedback from the community. Just last week, she had a parent who tweeted that they were struggling with MyCCS and needed some help. So she quickly sent that off to our team. They didn't have to write in to anybody. They just posted that on Twitter, and then we were able to respond to that. So she's using those tools to solicit feedback, whether desired or undesired, from parents, and then get it to the appropriate source to react to it.
I just want to add, Greg, I don't want to diminish the great work that the team has done in doing exactly what you described over the past few years. The website is filled with areas where people can click and provide email to the board, comments to the board, shout-outs for compliments. When we went through the redistricting process, we had almost all of the commentary coming on to us through the use of technology. So your question's appropriate, but I think we should be mindful of the fact that our team's done a very good job of achieving that over the past couple of years.
And finally, strategy 7 in this sub-goal is to allocate the resources to provide all of the aspects from personnel to professional development opportunities to support that use of technology. This is the embrace, if you please, that enfolds all of the previous 6 strategies and allows us to constantly review and make sense out of what kind of resources do we need and can we provide. I'm mindful of Mr. McMichael's comments about personnel. The budget for any aspect of things that we want to do is always finite.
I just have one question. I know I'm just thinking down in the future. 2014, the park assessments are coming up. They're going to be on the computer. And so each student in the school is going to have to be taking the test several times a year. So are we, I know that you're looking towards that. Are we going to be, have enough technology in the buildings to do that?
Until we get the exact specifics about the park assessments, it's hard to know what additional resources we're going to need. But as an example, this summer at the elementary levels, we added a 3rd lab to each school, so they have a permanent fixed lab, a second, a little bit smaller lab, and a mobile lab, so that all 3 grade levels, if mandated this year, would be able to take iStep online. So that's why we continue to increase those resources that are available at the building levels. We will likely need to increase at the middle school level. At the high school level, we've invested in Citrix previously, which is a platform that allows us to, at a little bit of a reduced cost, deliver a desktop environment to students without buying a full-fledged desktop. However, state reporting does not, or state testing does not work on that platform at this time. So it wasn't a piece that we could use for iStep type testing. So that's what we have to be careful of as we're investing in technology at this point, is making sure that the technology we're purchasing still works for the assessments. Currently, iPads are not an approved assessment tool for iStep. So when we're purchasing technology right now. We can't purchase iPads to use for those assessments. So when we're needing to continue to grow how many devices we have to really weigh that carefully.
This is probably a question for Ryan again, but I see that staffing assignments are another monitoring tool for this last category. What can you share with us about the district's thinking as far as staff assignments in the technology area?
Again, I would say that Christy's probably well-suited to answer this question as well, but I can try to support, and then she can pinch hit and help me where I miss things. But I would look at staffing assignments in addition to the instructional specialist who works with technology. I think all of our building technicians who work throughout the district to help maintain, troubleshoot problems would be key pieces to the staffing assignments that we already have in place. And obviously that would be something that we would monitor over time to see if we need additional, as we increase maybe capability, do we need additional staffing in certain buildings or something along those lines. I think the staffing piece would obviously be driven by the need for support.
And I can speak just a slight bit to that as well. Currently, our technical staffing does not even have a person per building. So those technicians are rotated and shared between buildings. And as we have continued to add devices, wireless devices, all of those types of things, we really haven't increased staff. We've been very consistent in our staff basis at the district. So that is something we monitor frequently. We look at our school dude numbers, which is the tracking system that we use, to allow us to know, are we at a point where we're going to need some additional staffing?
With that, we have reached the conclusion of our presentation on the sub-goals. We will certainly, pending the board's interest and approval, utilize our workshop and/or meeting that you have in September to request action at an appropriate point from your point of view as regards the strategic plan as presented.
Dr. Swenson has been very gracious in suggesting that perhaps we table the superintendent's goals so we can move ahead to our board report from Mr. David Day. So that being said, I need to get a motion to table the superintendent's goals.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Next. And next on our agenda, we have a report from Mr. David Day. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm going to do a PowerPoint. I have never done a PowerPoint. I can assure you that I did not put together this PowerPoint. And although I'm very impressed that it looks this good, but it's not because of me. So do I push this button? There we go. We'll talk a little bit about collective bargaining timetables and procedures this evening. And start with this note of caution. The State Board of Accounts has advised that it will be reviewing all teacher collective bargaining agreements as part of the State Board of Accounts audit process. And as I understand it, when you finish a contract, you have to send it along to the Indiana Educational Employment Relations Board. And my understanding is that they make a copy of it and immediately send it to the State Board of Accounts, is the process. And the State Board of Accounts looks at it to see if you are putting into the collective bargaining agreement things that the State Board of Accounts does not believe belong in those agreements. And the State Board of Accounts rubric, or is rubric a new word? I hear that a lot anymore. Well, the State Board of Accounts rubric, which is also the same as the guidance from DOE, if they find that you have placed something in the contract that you should not place in there, they will take an exception in the audit. If it's a repeated situation, they've suggested they would impose fines and or remove board members from office. So that's one of the things that we have to keep in mind as we move forward in the process. And feel free to interrupt me if you have questions. This is the bargaining timeline as produced by the Indiana Educational Relations Board in conjunction with the law that was passed in 2011. And basically, it says that before August the 1st, you may hold informal negotiations. Formal collective bargaining begins on August the 1st. And we see in here there's a couple of financial items. One is the Department of Ed's estimate of your general fund amounts that you'll receive from the state. Also, we know that the ADM count, which is very important for your state funding, will take place on the second Friday of September. If you don't have a contract by October the 1st, then the what's called the impasse period begins. And when you reach impasse, you have a mediation requirement. And that mediation period lasts for approximately 30 days. And we'll talk about what happens in mediation here in a moment. If you do not reach a contract through mediation, then you will find yourself in fact-finding. And we'll talk a little bit about what happens in fact-finding in a moment. But the bottom line is that if you don't have a contract by late November, early December, you will find yourself in a fact-finding process. And in fact-finding, ultimately the fact-finder will decide what your contract is. So you will either agree upon a contract prior to fact-finding, or during fact-finding, the state will give you a contract. So let's talk a little bit more about how that works. Okay, during the formal bargaining period, August 1st through September 30th, and during that formal bargaining period, the parties control the bargaining schedule. In other words, you can meet as frequently or as infrequently as you want. You're under no state mandate as to how often you meet or how you meet. And secondly, during that period of time, the school can use any part of its general fund, including the cash balance, to fund the settlement. So you have more freedom during the formal bargaining period than you will have ultimately in fact-finding, as we will see. Now, if you're not done by Monday, October the 1st this year, then mediation will begin, and it will be instituted by the Indiana Educational and Employment Relations Board. And during the mediation period, the parties are required to attend at least one and perhaps up to 3 mediation sessions within a 30-day period. And the cost of that mediation is split between the parties. The mediator will be appointed by IRB, will come in and charge you an hourly rate, and that cost is split then between the board and the association. In mediation, you still may use any part of your general fund, including the cash balance, to pay for the settlement. Okay? And then finally, during mediation, you will either settle, or at the last mediation session, you will be required to prepare a last best offer, which you must give to the other side, and which is submitted to the IRB at the end of the mediation if you have no resolution. Okay, last best offers. And that's kind of a misnomer, as you will see. If a mediation doesn't result in a settlement, each party must submit a last best offer. Now here's the big change. When you get to the fact-finding process, the last best offer can only be funded by those funds certified by the Department of Education. Your basic tuition support, your honors grant, special education numbers, career and technical education, and your general fund referendum amount, if you have one. Of course you do. Those would have to be the sources of funding. And what's important about that is when you submit your last best offer, both sides are required to certify that their offer does not result in deficit financing. And the definition of deficit financing is very specific. It says current year expenditures compared to current year funds. So anything that you carry into negotiations, like your cash balance, cannot be used in determining how you fund your last best offer. That's emphasized here. You cannot use any other part of the general fund, including but not limited to your cash balance, to pay for the cost of the last best offer. The impact of this means that you have more funding available prior to fact-finding than you do during fact-finding. And if you go to last best offer, you have to prepare and submit a number of documents that are required by IRB as your fiscal rationale for that offer. So it's I was involved in one of these last year, and it's quite the collection of documents that get put together for this. So, what happened in fact-finding? Well, it's automatic. There's a fact-finding hearing. The fact-finder adopts one party's last best offer. In other words, he can't choose between the last best offer. He can't take, well, I'll take point A, B, and C from your last best offer and point D, E, and F and put it together and make one contract. He chooses one side or the other side. And he has no jurisdiction or discretion to go beyond that. He also has to be, or he or she, has to be sure that that offer complies with the bargaining law as interpreted by IRB. In other words, it can't include items that are not within the mandatory subjects of bargain. And he has to, or she has to conclude that the contract, the last best offer, does not result in deficit financing. The fact finder's decision cannot go beyond a party's last best offer or result in deficit financing. Finally, the fact-finding process is limited to 15 calendar days from the times it starts till the fact finder issues his decision. So you find yourself on a very fast track when you go into fact-finding. Cost, again, split by the parties. You can appeal the fact finder's decision to the full Indiana Educational Employment Relations Board. And if you do appeal, their decision cannot go beyond the party's last best offer or result in deficit financing. And the decision must be reached within 30 days of receipt of the appeal. So the fact finder's decision, by the way this calendar works, will be done by the end of the calendar year. If there's an appeal, the IRB decision will be done by the end of January. Okay? Now, that decision then may be appealed to court, and of course, once it gets into court, the court determines how long it takes to make a decision. Okay? End of slideshow. Click there. Oh, okay, I'm done. That's the process that you are currently engaged in. Questions?
Thank you, David. I do have one question. I understood your use of the term last best offer in relation to the fact finding, that the last best offer of either party cannot include deficit financing, but unless I misunderstood, you also used that term when you talked about the mediation period?
Yes.
At the end of the mediation period, can a last best offer include deficit spending or deficit financing?
Your offers in mediation can include any source of funding that you have. So it's not limited to this year's revenues versus this year's expenditures. So essentially, you can use more money to fund mediation than you can if you've got cash balance, for example. You can use
all the way through the mediation.
All the way through the mediation. And what's interesting about that, the last best offer nomenclature is sort of confusing, because you would think it would be the best offer that you could put on the table. As a practical matter, it's probably not going to be as good. If you got cash balance, it's not going to be as good an offer. So it's really not your best offer. It's your last best offer as defined by this process.
Leila, I have one more unrelated question. When you describe the appeal process, you describe two levels of appeal, one to IRB and then ultimately one
to the court.
On the appeal to the IRB, would that simply be an appeal to take the other position?
Yes.
The IRB doesn't have the ability to split?
No, IRB has to take one or the other last best offers. They would be looking at the fact finder's decision and determining whether it's, in their opinion, the last best offer that needs to be imposed.
Thank you.
But no, they can't do anything beyond the fact finder except basically substitute their judgment for the fact finder's judgment.
And actually, really to follow up, David, the last best offer includes the finances as far as staying away from deficit financing, but also includes language determined by...
Your last best offer, essentially what you have to do is you have to say, here is the contract. So it's not just a financial offer, it's language, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you actually put together a contract and say, here's our contract. The association puts together a contract. They say, here's our contract. And then the fact finder chooses one of those.
And then what happens if one or both of those contracts, proposed contracts, includes language that is deemed no longer legal to be in there?
Yeah. We don't know, but the way the law is written and the way IERB has said, that they will not consider a last best offer to be a valid offer that can be accepted if it contains language that's inappropriate, or not inappropriate, language that doesn't comply with their interpretation of the statute.
Okay, thank you very much, appreciate it.
That's why putting together last best offer is so difficult, because usually in bargaining you're talking about concepts, and you kind of reach agreement on concepts and tentative agreement, and then you reduce it to language. But this process requires you to essentially write the contract that you're willing to live with for both sides, and then they choose one.
I do have a follow-up question, David. Just hypothetically, and I know you're probably not going to like the word hypothetically, if we had two parties, each of which offered a last best offer which was unacceptable to IRB, for example, either because of the deficit funding question or because of extraneous language issues that are not permitted by statute, if both are unacceptable to IRB, what happens?
Well, supposedly, IRB is going to tell you as part of the mediation process if they believe that your last best offer has problems. In other words, they're trying not to surprise you at the fact-finding stage. Supposedly, the mediator is going to help you shape an offer that they believe to be compliant. Now, either party could say, we don't agree with the mediator, we're going to submit our last best offer to the fact finder. But obviously, IRB is like everyone else trying to feel their way through this process and the system. And last year, it was fairly chaotic. And fortunately, they only had two with the fact finding, and it was still, I can tell you, being in one, it was a little bit like, you probably won't get to, do you ever read Calvin and Hobbes? A long time ago, there was something called Calvin Ball. They kind of made up the rules as they went along. Yes, it was kind of like Calvin Ball. With all due respect to the people who were trying to do it, because they were like the rest of us. They were trying to feel their way through it.
Do we have any other questions for Mr. Day? Okay, thank you very much, David, for presenting.
Yes, if asked by the younger people in my law firm, tell them I did a good job with my paralegal. Thank you.
Okay, next on our list is Superintendent's Report. Jeff, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Very briefly, yes. Dana's, through the magic of technology.
At the bottom.
It's up. It's up. Very briefly, we have arrayed, pardon me, ISEP plus English Language Arts scores in an attempt to just very briefly illustrate the progress children make as they go through our school system. And this percentage adds the students who have earned a pass and a pass plus. It got way too complicated to show in the progression to somehow split these numbers. But I would, just for the sake of illustration, take you from the very top left hand under third grade in the year 2007. You will notice that at that time, that group of students were at 91% at or above the passing mark in ISTEP for English Language Arts. If you follow the yellow brick road down to the bottom right-hand corner, those children in 8th grade have risen, if you please, as a cohort now to 95% at or above. so that what you can do is follow any of the colored lines or roads, so to speak, to ascertain in a very general way how are we doing in terms of those large groups of children. One of the things that I've done in this is, you will note, between 2008 and 2009, we adopted our Rigby literacy program, and you get a sense for, kind of where we went from that point on. It's the same kids, same cohort. That doesn't change. And then for future reference, the Common Core State Standards utilization in our everyday math program has just begun with the 2012 administration of the ISTEP, obviously last spring. So as this would grow and as these young people move as cohorts through our school district, we obviously spend time, as large groups, but of course I think we're exceptional because of Pinnacle and Power School at really drilling down. But it's an interesting, if brief, analysis of our effect overall across the board, grades 3rd through 8, and comparing the same children to the same children. And that's I think, one of the virtues of this very brief presentation for English Language Arts. And then this next same idea, but in mathematics, and I've included the same idea. While no, Rigby is not a mathematics program, it certainly would increase thinking and learning via literacy, because so many of the questions and mathematical situations do in fact involve more reading, and of course our mathematics teachers and the various standards that we adhere to also demand explication or explanation by students of, how'd you get the answer? What was your thinking? How'd you get there? So that Rigby is not an illogical insertion here. And then, of course, the Common Core State Standards Everyday Math, the same idea, obviously. We just really have adopted those. But again, if you follow whatever colored road, so to speak, with that individual cohort, wherever you want to begin with those children, you get a sense for both the previous slide in language arts and here in mathematics, the effect of our adoption of these programs, or the effect of the best practices that we involve, the effect of the utilization of data to understand how are children doing, and then the responsive classrooms that we create across our district to understand more, to intervene in a more effective way, and then, of course, to make that difference for understanding, again, across the board. So with that, I wanted to just call that to the board's attention as a matter for information. And that concludes my superintendent's report.
Thank you. I just briefly wanted to share with everybody here and with the audience that typically our reports we do post on our website, and we will have the statutory requirements for negotiations. The report that Mr. David Day gave to us this evening, that will be posted on our website as well. So if you wanted to go back and take a look and review that outline, it will be available. Do we have other board members who have a report they might like to share? Okay. Well, with that, I motion to adjourn. Okay. All in favor? Fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you. I think you've done it. I think once it goes red,
Yeah.